Good morning and welcome to Kirklees Adventures Live. My name is Dinah, as in dinosaur, and I am one of the many librarians in Kirklees Libraries. I love books. In fact, all I've grown up in is a house oozing with books. My granddad had so many books, he used to have them to keep them in the bath. Yep, in the bath. That's a lot of soggy books. My granddad had so many books. Do you love books? Stories, poems, jokes? You do? Cool bananas. We would love to hear about the books that you enjoy. Oh yes, we would. Share us with us your favourite story, your jokes, your poems, book cover, your favourite characters in your book. We would love to hear about these, and you can send them to us at Kirklees, lal@kirklees.gov.uk. Ta-da! Okay, I'm loving Library Adventures Live. Talking about magical, I am super excited for today's Libraries Adventures Live. We have fantastic award-winning author Ross Montgomery joining us today. Ross has written lots of children's books, which include Space Tortoise, Max and the Millions, The Building Boy, Alex the Dog and the Unopenable Door, Christmas Dinner of Souls, and Perigee and Me. And you can borrow these for free at one of our many libraries. Today, he's going to give us a sneaky peek into his spectacular new book, The Midnight Guardians. It's a magical story, both funny and thrilling. It's set during World War II, and it tells the story of a young boy called Col, whose childhood imaginary friends come to life. And do you know, girls and boys, grown-ups, I can tell you we are super lucky in Kirklees because The Midnight Guardians is not yet out in the shops. But don't worry, it soon will be. We are going to be the first to hear pages from it. Yes, we are the first ones. Ooh, I feel lucky to be on Libraries Adventures Live today. But before we meet him, I like to keep you excited. I want to ask you something. Will you help me and the other librarians? You will? Okay, ta very much. We need you to fill our website with lots of your super duper drawings, stories, jokes, all your creations that you've been busy doing over the summer holidays. All the ideas and tips that amazing authors on Library Adventures Live have been showing. Our fantastic authors on Library Adventures Live over the last few weeks have shared with us their football stories, adventures in the Amazon, a little girl called Hope Jones who enjoys saving the world, and much, much more. Did you see last week's Library Adventures Live with our young presenters? You did? Supersonic. Wasn't it fab? If you didn't, well, don't worry. You can still get a thumbs up because you can watch it on our Facebook and YouTube channel. Author Joss Lacey showed us last week how to draw animal characters, and we would love to see your own animal characters. Remember, you could win a copy of his book. Okie dokie. It's time for today's guest. Right then, all you fantastic library adventurers, are you ready for today's treat? Are you ready to say her humongous, loud, roof-lifting hello to our special guest, Ross? You are? Okay. Ready, and here we go. Hello to Ross.
Hey!
Hey!
I can hear you saying hello from here. It's just overwhelming.
Welcome, Ross. I'm so excited to have you here. How are you?
No, thank you so much for having me. I'm doing great. This is where I live. This is my house. Everybody have a good look while I'm here.
And where's your house, Ross? Are you in Yorkshire?
So I live all the way down in London. I've just moved to Crystal Palace,
Yeah.
which is a pretty amazing place. It's where they literally used to have the enormous Crystal Palace until it burned down in the year 1900. So instead, now there's just a big bit where it used to be.
Right. Brilliant. And is it sunny in London?
You know what? For now, it is. I'm looking outside and it's
Yeah.
looking just about okay. So yeah, I'll keep you updated on that.
Fantastic. Well, we're really, really excited to have you here. You've written lots of books, Ross, and lots of
Oh, thank
children's
you.
books. And today, you're going to be talking about a new book that's coming out very soon. Is that right?
I am, and as you say, I'm very excited about this. You guys are getting like a super sneak peek. This was actually
Wow.
going to be out in a few days' time, but it's now not going to be published until November. So you guys are like
Oh,
2 months before anyone else in the world,
wow. Oh
the
my gosh.
universe.
In
Yeah.
Kirklees, we are so lucky. And this book, I've been reading it, Ross. I'm very lucky to have my own little copy, sneaky peek view. And on the back, it says that this book is a torch under the duvet. Can't stop reading magic. And do you know what? I have actually been under my duvet with the torch on my phone reading it. It's taken me to places I've not been since I was a child.
Oh, thank you so much. That's
You're
exactly what I was
welcome.
hoping for.
You're welcome. So we really like to hear more about the book, and I believe that you're going to tell all the girls and boys and grown-ups a little bit more now. Is that right?
I am, yes. This is really exciting. I haven't had a chance to do this many times before, so consider yourselves very fortunate to be hearing exactly what this book is about. I think what I'll do to start off is I just want to make sure that everybody has a chance to actually have a look at that front cover, which I think is absolutely beautiful. This is, in fact, let me have another little go at that. So this is a front cover by the illustrator David Dean, which I think is absolutely beautiful. I think one of the things that I've always liked about front covers is it's always the point where you enter a story first. And I love that moment where you pick up a book and you look at what you have in front of you and you realize, I have no idea what could possibly be happening in this story. It's always the thing that makes you want to just pick it up and start reading. So rather than explain in depth about the story and tell you about the characters and try and explain the plot, I think what I want to do instead is I want to start just on page 1. And I'm going to read you the opening chapter of this book. What I wanted to do when I wrote this chapter was really just find a way of hooking the reader in and get them sort of asking so many questions about what's going on and give them so many little riddles that they need to work out that it would sort of drive them to keep reading. So without any further ado, here is chapter 1 of The Midnight Guardians. Tonight is the darkest night of the year. It's so dark you can barely make out the stone cottage sitting in front of you. It's the only building in the valley. A path runs right from the fields to a red front door, framed by the remains of a rose bush. In summer, when the days are long and warm, the roses flourish. But there are no roses now. It's the dead of winter and the dead of night. The door is surrounded by thorns. The cottage is dark inside, even darker than outside. The windows are hung with heavy curtains, so that no light can escape and none can get in. There's a fireplace in the corner, but it's been a long time since anyone has lit it. The cottage is bone cold, frozen from the inside out. Even the floor stones are coated with frost. It is silent, and it's dark, and it's dead. But not completely. From somewhere in the attic, a light is glowing. It comes from a single candle that rests in the center of the floor. The light gleams off the rubbish packed high to the rafters, broken boxes, old rugs, furniture, all of it left and forgotten. The glow is small, but strong. It feels like it could light the whole house if it tried. 3 figures sit around it. They've been waiting for some time. "This is stupid," says the first. It's a knight in shining armour. He's much smaller than you'd expect, no bigger than a child. The candlelight shimmers off his breastplate and catches on the edge of his lance. A moustache pokes from his visor and dances when he talks. "He's not coming! We're going to get in heaps of trouble, and it'll all be for..." "Quiet, rogue." The knight turns to the figure beside him. A badger. But this is no ordinary badger. He's smoking a pipe. He carries a club. He wears a tweed waistcoat. Also, he can talk. "I told you not to call me that," says the knight. The badger bristles. Oh, your name. I can't call you your name now." "It's not Rogue," says the knight. "It's the king of rogues. I've told you 1,000 times. I don't call you Noakes, do I? I call you Mr. Noakes, because that's what he named you, and so..." "Quiet, both of you." The knight and the badger turn to the third figure. A Bengal tiger, towering over the room around her. Her head is lost to the gloom of the ceiling. Her whiskers catch the cobwebs in the eaves. "Col will come," she says. "Maybe not tonight, maybe not tomorrow, but he will come. We just have to keep calling him, that's all." She shuffles. "Now, if you two don't mind, I'd rather not doing it, listening to the two of you squabble like a pair of old ladies." The badger grumbles, puts his club down. The knight sighs. "Oh, Pendlebury, how can you be so sure that Col is coming?" The tiger gives him a look that seems at first like anger, but it's not anger. It's fear. She is very, very scared. "Because," she says, "he's the only hope we have." That is the end of the first chapter of this book. And as I said, I wanted to write a chapter that was going to hook people in and make them want to find out more. It's such a strange moment to go inside a completely empty cottage and suddenly find a badger and a knight and a tiger sat on their own talking about a character called Col. But what I wanted to do was make the reader just keep going and find out what on earth is going on, which is what I'm going to do now. Now, as Dinah explained, this book is, to be honest, for me, it's the first book that I've ever had a go setting in the real world. It's actually set during a real period of time in history, and I'm going to explain a little bit more about that now. The story is set during the Second World War. When the story begins, it's the 21st of December, 1940. Now, at this point, the Second World War had been going on for just over a year. And if you lived in Britain, for that first year, nothing much really happened. Rationing came in. People were reading the news every single day, trying to work out how the war was going. But the fighting was all happening in other countries, hundreds of miles away. And then, in September 1940, that all began to change. That was when enemy planes started flying over Britain almost every single night and dropping bombs. Now, bombs were dropped over lots of different places. Cities were obviously very common for them to try and hit. London was famously bombed 67 nights in a row. But it wasn't just London. Manchester, Liverpool, Sheffield, Coventry, Bristol, not just cities either, factories, docks, all of them were targeted by bombs that would be dropped, as I said, almost every single night. Now, as you can imagine, in order to try and avoid being hit by bombs, people had to do as many different things as they could to be safe. One of the most famous things that happened was called the blackout. What it meant was that every single night, in order to try and hide cities from planes flying overhead, everybody would have to turn off their lights. There would be no street lamps. Car headlights would be covered over with tape, so they only let out a tiny amount of light. With your house, you had to make sure that there were curtains up on every single window, special blackout curtains that let out no light whatsoever. As you can imagine, whole cities overnight suddenly became pitch black. They actually became quite dangerous places to be. Apparently, 1 in 5 people would have an accident during blackout, just walking around, and, well, you can imagine, accidentally walking into lampposts, tripping over holes they couldn't see. It became really dangerous. Not only that, if enemy planes were flying over and dropping bombs on the city, people had to find shelter. Now, some people would shelter in cupboards under their stairs. Some people would shelter underneath their dining tables. Some people would even have a little tin shelter called an Anderson shelter, maybe in their back garden. But for most people, especially in cities, it meant finding a public shelter. And these were all over the place. Now, this particular photo I love. In London, where they have lots of underground trains in the tube, they started using them as shelters. You can see this is Aldwych Station, that's it. Well, they actually let people just go to sleep on the tracks to use as shelter. Living in cities was a really dangerous place to be. Now, because it was dangerous, one of the other things they realized they had to do was get children out of the cities. Now, this happened several times throughout the war. Children would be sent by the millions out of cities, out of London, out of Sheffield, out of Manchester, and sent to live in the countryside, because in the countryside, you were less likely to be suddenly find that your town was going to be bombed. Planes were mainly after, as I say, cities and factories and docks. Millions of people all over Britain were sent out to live sometimes in the middle of nowhere and live with complete strangers. Some children had amazing experiences, really getting a chance to see a different part of the country and live with people who are really kind. Some people didn't have very nice experiences. Some people were sent away and made to work every single day as farm labourers. But as you can imagine, if you were sent away from your family for who knows how long, you might find that really tough. This is where we meet the main character of this story, Col. Now, Col is 12 years old and has lived his entire life in London. It's his home. And he's always lived with his older sister, Rose, and his dad. And they've been very happy together. But when the story begins, we find out that Col has had a really tragic and terrible few months. His father has been killed in an accident. And so he's had no choice but to be evacuated from London, away from his home, away from everything he knows, away from his sister Rose, and sent to live in Buxton. Now, Buxton's not a million miles away from Kirklees, but it's about 150 miles away from London. And Col has been sent to live with his Aunt Claire, who, to be honest, is a little cold. Col has never felt lonelier, more miserable, more homesick. The only thing that's really keeping him going is knowing that when Christmas comes around, he'll finally be able to go back to London and see his older sister Rose, and they'll celebrate Christmas just like they used to. But when the story begins, we discover that Col isn't going to be able to do that as he hoped. I mean, after all, there's a war on. To be able to take a train to the other end of the country when bombs are being dropped, it's not safe. But to be honest, for Col, learning that thing that he's been looking forward to for months, I'm sure you can imagine it breaks him. Because he's so upset, he ends up running away. And he goes to the one place that he feels he can go back to. The cottage where his father grew up, in a place called Darkwell End. It's completely empty. They haven't been back there for years and years. But even though there's no one there, Col feels like, at least if he's there, he might feel close to his family again. But when Cole gets there, he discovers that the cottage isn't empty. He discovers that his imaginary friends, the ones that he hasn't thought about for years, have come to life. And they're waiting for him. Now, those are those three characters that you met in that first chapter that I read, the badger, the knight, and the tiger. What I'm going to do now is I want to jump ahead to another bit in the story, and I'm going to read you the moment that Cole sees them for the first time, and I get to introduce them a little bit better. Here is a short extract from a chapter called The Return of the Guardians. Cole stared at his imaginary friends. The Guardians were exactly as he'd always imagined them. Pendlebury, the tiger, was sleek and mysterious, a creature woven from stars and midnight. Mr. Noakes, the badger, was moth-eaten and burly, like an affable old man in a country pub. The King of Rogues, the knight, was all bug eyes and wonky limbs, more of a puppet than a person. But they weren't imaginary anymore. They were real. They were talking and moving in front of him like real people. And their colours. Since the war began, the world had been all ration book greys and blacks, weak tea and burnt toast. Winter had drained the life from everything. But the Guardians were so bright, so vivid. They seemed almost to shimmer in the air. Cole was utterly speechless. The King of Rogues suddenly threw himself to the floor in front of him, sounding like a stack of tin cans being chucked down a staircase. "My liege! I never once doubted you would come." He bowed his head over his sword. "We, your loyal guardians, have returned to our place of making to fulfill our sacred duty," and Mr. Noakes bustled him to one side. "Oh, leave off! Poor lad can't understand a word you're saying." He stood in front of Cole and beamed furrily. "What an honour it is to finally see you in the flesh, Master Cole. You've become a fine young gentleman, I see. Look at you all dressed up in your fine monkey suit." Pendlebury poured herself down from the rafters. "Boys, please, give Cole some room. This must be a lot for him to take in. After all, he's never seen us like this before. Have you, Cole?" Cole yelped. The tiger's tail had reached behind him and was tickling him on the cheek. "Ah! What's going on?" he cried. "What's happening?" The Guardian's smiles dropped. "Is he frightened?" said the King of Rogues. "He doesn't seem very happy to see us," said Mr. Noakes. Cole shook his head like a dog trying to dry itself. This was all too much. There was no way that his imaginary friends were standing in front of him in his attic. "This isn't happening. It's not real. I'll close my eyes. When I open them again, you'll be gone." He closed his eyes, counted to 5, and opened them. The Guardians were still standing in front of him, now looking slightly more confused. "Ah!" said Cole. "He is frightened," said Mr. Noakes. "Of course he's frightened," snapped the King of Rogues. "Look at you. You're standing 2 inches in front of his face, and she's the size of a dragon. For heaven's sake, Pendlebury, make yourself presentable." The tiger raised an eyebrow. The knight gulped. I mean, if you wouldn't mind," he said. There was a short, sharp sound, like the ripping of stitches. And then Pendlebury was the size of a regular tiger, without anyone knowing quite how she'd done it. "Better," she said. Maybe a little smaller," said the King of Rogues. "No," said Pendlebury. Cole stared at the tiger in shock. He could see every strand of her fur, shifting and swaying in the candlelight. There was no doubting it. She was as real as he was. She turned to face him and spoke. "Do not be frightened, Cole. It's us. your guardians, your lifelong friends and protectors. We have broken all the laws of our kind to come into your world and bring you dire news. There is much that will shock you, much that you will struggle to believe. But you must believe, Cole. If you don't, then all is lost. And I'm going to finish reading that chapter there, even though that's not quite where it ends. The Guardians have come back for a reason. They have come back to warn Cole that in a week's time, there's going to be another raid on London. The worst one yet. And his sister Rose is in terrible danger. Their only hope of saving her is if they travel together 150 miles across the length of Britain to try and get to London to save her before it's too late. And so that's what they do. Now, I don't want to give away too much about what happens in the story because obviously that would be a really weird thing for me to do. But safe to say, their quest, their journey, doesn't go quite as planned. Along the way, they meet enchanted trees, fairies, giants, but they're also being pursued by a terrifying evil character, the Lord of all Darkness, who is called the Midwinter King, who it turns out has got his own reasons for trying to stop Cole's quest. I hope you enjoyed listening to me talk about the Midnight Guardians. I hope I've given you an idea of all the different stuff that goes on. But yeah, I hope you look forward to it. Oh, Dinah, I think you might be on mute.
Oh, hi.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ross. That's really, it sounds exciting. And as I say, some real twists and turns. It's not all straightforward. There's lots of, scary bits throughout the story that keep you excited.
I love scary bits.
We've got some questions, Ross, if that's
please.
all right. Yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
A really good one here when we talk about imaginary friends. So we've got here, did you have an imaginary friend, Ross, when you were younger? Like Cole?
You know what? I think that most of the characters that I write in my books are always based a little bit on me. And then I like to combine them with other people that I know and things like that. I was one of those kids who was just lost in my imagination for most of my childhood. I would shut myself away for hours and just basically play imaginary games with characters that I made up in my head. I think in some respects, they were maybe like the first stories that I was ever making. I wasn't writing anything down, but I was kind of working out like plots in my head and all these different things they could do. I didn't have like one imaginary character that came back again and again and again. I sort of had loads that I was slightly obsessed with. My favorite thing, and I don't know if anybody else does this, but my bedroom ceiling when I was a kid was sort of painted with swirls of white paint, and I felt like I could see faces in them all the time. So I was to pretend like my bedroom was covered in all these different faces or all these different characters. So I had loads of them, but I didn't have like one imaginary friend that kind of stuck by me the whole time. Did you have any?
Pardon?
Did you have any imaginary friends?
I used to, but I was an only one. I had no brothers and sisters. So I used to have, I used to play schools and post offices. And I always had my little imaginary friends sat in my post office or in my school with my little blackboard. And I was a very chatterbox person. And but I didn't have one particular imaginary friend, but I used to talk to myself quite a lot. I think that was quite normal.
Exactly. I don't trust children unless they talk to themselves. Like, you know what's going on.
It's where your inspiration comes, isn't it, sometimes? And we've got a question here about from Matty Taylor, who actually wants to go and get the book now and read on. So that's fantastic.
I hope you like waiting, Matty.
But also ask, where does your inspiration come from when you're writing? Is there any particular place that you are more inspired, like writing on the bus or in the shower, or late
I
at
do.
night.
I find that I wish there was like sort of almost one place that I could sort of like guarantee I could go and that would help me come up with ideas. I think what I've normally found from, I guess, a few years of doing this is that ideas just jump out at you almost from the wild. And you just have to quickly scribble them down before you forget them. I think that there's a real temptation. You suddenly think up an idea and you go, well, that's good. I'll remember that for later. You won't. I'm not lying. You just won't. You have to scribble it down.
Lots
so I
of
normally
post-it
find,
notes.
oh, honestly, like it's my number one tip. I've got notebooks coming out of my ears, just all over the place. I just make sure I've got one with me wherever I go, just to quickly scribble it down. And then that little idea will sort of become almost like the seed of something and like help it grow. I normally find I tend to come up with ideas just after my first coffee when I'm out and about walking. I always find that my best ideas have normally come when I'm maybe on a bus or on a train and my mind's just wandering, and then suddenly something will go boop, and I go, oh, what have I done? That's what I do now.
Another question, if that's all right, Ross, because they're coming through. Yeah. They're coming through thick and fast at the moment, which is great. So remember, we really want to hear from you, listeners, and you can post your messages and ask Ross them live on by putting them in the Facebook or the YouTube chat. But we've got one here from Amanda. This says, sounds very well researched. Do you use public libraries? Whoa, that's promoting us. To do any research for his books?
Did I ever? This is honestly, I've never written a book before that's set in the real world during a real period of history. Normally, my books are sort of, you know, they're in this world, but I can just change whatever I want. And I'll go, it's like everything is the same as our world, but you can fly, and I can just do that. With this, I had to make sure that I was actually understanding what was going on during that period of history. I spent days in libraries, but also it was brilliant. I could, if I was buying the amount of books that I read, I would have spent hundreds of pounds. And instead, I read absolutely shed loads and I didn't spend a penny. I will actually, I've got some photos of like some of the cool research that I did for this story. I just want to share a couple of them with you.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Yeah, you might find this really boring, but I don't. I think it's really cool.
No, we love photos.
Oh, brilliant. One of the things that I did is in London, in Kew, there's a place called the National Archives, where they basically keep hundreds of years of paperwork from all over the country, including the bomb maps from different cities all over Britain. What would happen is every time a bomb was dropped, they wanted to make sure they had a record of it, of where it landed, how much damage it did. So you get these enormous maps of London and then these enormous sheets of tracing paper that go over the top, showing you exactly where bombs hit every single night. And every single one of these bombs will then be linked to a written report about exactly what happened, about what was damaged, if anybody was injured during it, things like that. I spent hours looking at these. In fact, again, I don't want to give away too much, but it was while looking at these bomb maps that I realized a particular thing that I wanted to happen in this book. So there is a moment in this book that is based on something that really, to be honest, I mean, lots of the book is based on things that really happened, but there's one particular moment where it's based on this particular bit of information that I found. And I thought, I've got to write that down. I also spent loads of time in the British Library looking at newspapers from 1940. And this was so interesting. I think I knew lots of bits and pieces about the Second World War. There was loads of stuff that I didn't know. And one of the things that was really nice was looking at newspapers back then and comparing them to stuff that I feel I'm looking at newspapers now. Of, you know, I think when people talk about the Second World War, we talk about, you know, everybody pulling together, everybody like, you know, making sure they were working hard to, you know, keep Britain running and protect each other. I found it really interesting to find out there were loads of people who weren't. There were loads of like people who were taking advantage of all of that chaos to commit as much crime as possible. I mean, if you think about it, you know, I spoke about blackout earlier, all the lights being turned out. It was perfect if you wanted to commit crimes. You're like, brilliant. No lights, go in that house and steal stuff. Done. And I wanted to have bits like that in my story, as many as possible.
Yeah, brilliant. Brilliant. Going back to libraries, Ross, do you have early memories of going to the library as a little boy? You have a local library that you used to visit?
I did. I think I was really lucky in this respect, because my mum and dad sort of noticed that I really liked reading and I really liked making stories. And so they just did the only logical thing that you should do, which is that they took me to Windsor and Eton Central Library, and they just put me in it and went, go. And that was it. I was just allowed to sort of take out any book that I was interested in and sit down and read it. And I think that was probably the single best thing that you can do. I'm always surprised when I speak to people who, maybe they have children who are really interested in books, and they don't make use of the fact that they've got this local library where you can take out, I don't know how many people you take out in these libraries, but I've been to, I think in that Windsor and Maidenhead Central, you could take out 20 a week, 20 books. That means you can just pick them up and go, no, and then read the next one and throw them. That was just a joke. Definitely don't do that. Perfect. I think one of the problems with buying books every single time that you want to read one, apart from the fact that it's really expensive, is it means that you're more likely to wait until there's one that you know you're going to like, and then you're going to buy it. The next one in a series. Whereas in a library, if they're free, it means you can just try out stuff that you've never read before. And it's the best way to expose yourself to authors you've never heard of. I think if I hadn't had that, I never would have discovered half the writers that I completely love, and that made me want to write books myself. I cannot recommend it enough.
Fantastic. You talk about authors that you love. On your website, you mention a couple of authors. Have you got any favourite authors that you like to read? When we're not reading about you, Ross, and your books, what books would you recommend to the listeners out there?
Every time I've been into a school, people always say, what's your favourite book? Who's your favourite author? And there's that weird thing that I think grown-ups have, which is that when you're a kid, you've got like a favourite thing. You go like, what's your favourite colour? And they go, blue. You go, what's your favourite food? And they go, pizza. And they don't even think about it. When you're a grown-up, you tend to have like 50 favourite things. So I've got like 50 favourite authors, depending on my mood. I have recently, I've been on a bit of a run of reading Neil Gaiman books, who I just think is amazing. The number one I always mention, just because I think people recognise it, is if you've seen the film Coraline, which is brilliant. He wrote the book Coraline. I didn't read the book for years. I sort of thought, I watched the film. The film's really good. I'm sure the book is great, but I've got other things I want to read. I didn't realise how good the book is. I mean, the film is great. The book is probably one of my favourite books ever. I think it's an absolute masterpiece. If you like imaginative stories that are also kind of terrifying, read Coraline. It's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've read it and loved it. It's really good. Ross, we've got another question. Did you design the cover of the book, or did you do any of the illustrations in the book?
I didn't. I mean, I'll be honest. I like drawing. I'm not good at it. But it is interesting. I think a lot of times when I speak to loads of children about the books that I make, I think people always think that the author must have something to do with the drawings, but it very rarely is the case. I mean, that front cover is by a man called David Dean, who's absolutely amazing. He's done loads of stuff. If you've read The Girl Who Stole an Elephant, that's been quite a popular book recently. That's him. Let me think some other ones. There's a new one by an author called Natasha Farrant, I think it's called The Voyage of the Sparrowhawk. That's out in the shops at the moment. He did that one too. He's one of those illustrators where once you start noticing his style, you'll see that he's got work everywhere. this was all him. And I have to say as well, this was pretty much like how it came in. He made basically 0 changes. I think they sort of decided there was like one plane up at the top, and they said, let's add another plane just next to it. That's pretty much the only change. But he nailed all of this perfectly. And I love it. I love those characters. That tiger, the badger, the knight. Also, this mysterious character who I'm not going to tell you anything about, but she becomes very important for the quest. I love that.
You have to read the book you have to read the book to find out the mysterious character, who was very important in the story as well.
Exactly.
So keep the questions coming through. We've got another question for you.
Go on.
Yeah, somebody has heard that you once met the Queen and fainted in front of the Queen. Is that right, Ross?
Yes. Right. Story time. I used to, when I was much younger, about sort of 7, 8 years old, I was a choir boy. And what that meant was that every single Sunday, I'd go to a chapel that was kind of near where I lived. And I'd sort of sing in the choir for about sort of an hour a week, something like that. And I was like a full-on choir boy. I had the ruff and a cassock. You know, that's all the super fancy names for what you wear when you're a choir boy. I know all that. Basically, that was what I did. But it was quite a special chapel. It was in Windsor Great Park, which was near where I lived. And that chapel belonged to the Queen Mother. Who I imagine there'll be some children who haven't heard of her, but she was the Queen's mother, and that was her title, the Queen Mother. It was her chapel, and that meant that every now and then you would be singing in the choir, and then you'd look to the front of the chapel, and you would see that she was there. And sometimes there'd be other members of the royal family who were maybe visiting, and they were there that day, and it was really exciting. Another fact about me is that I faint quite a lot. I faint very easily. Because I do it a lot, I'm actually able to like tell when it's about to happen. There are like some warning signs. It means that I can quickly do everything I can to make sure that I don't faint. Sometimes it's that I need to drink some water, or maybe sit down if I've been standing up, maybe if I'm a bit too hot. And it means that I can very quickly just sort of fix it before it happens. Back then, I'd never fainted before. So I didn't know what the warning signs were. So we were all standing up, we're in the middle of a song, and I started getting spots in front of my eyes. Now I know now that means quick, sit down before you faint. But I didn't know that then. So I just went, oh, that's nice. And then I started like feeling really hot and swaying. And I went, cool. And then, I mean, people who have fainted, you'll know what happens. You just, everything goes black, and that's it.
Yeah.
But the weird thing is that you don't seem to notice that it's happened. Like you just sort of accept it, and you go, oh, okay, that's interesting. And then there's suddenly a moment where you go, hang on, I was standing up a few moments ago, and now I'm not. And that's when you come to. I came to. I'd fainted in the middle of a song. I had also taken out the boy next to me as I fainted with my head. So we were just both like lying on the floor. And also anyone who's fainted, you know that when it happens, you feel awful afterwards. Like you feel really sick and really shaky. So obviously I had to be taken out. I couldn't keep singing. So they led me out. And just before I went out the door, I turned around and the entire royal family had visited that day. So it was the Queen, Prince Charles, Princess Diana, Harry and William when they were really young. They were all there.
Oh.
So yeah, that was the best day of my life. And I'm glad I told you all about it.
Thank you, Ross. Now, each Library Adventures Live, we like to set the children a challenge. Okay, we like to set the children and the grown-ups as well. So grown-ups, you can join in. We wondered if you had a challenge for our children and listeners this week.
I do
you
indeed.
Have one? Oh,
So I have been thinking, obviously, a lot while I've been writing this book about the idea of imaginary friends. And the nice thing about making up imaginary friends is they can be anything that you want. They can be a hat with a moustache that talks and flies. Really, there's no limit. It doesn't have to make sense. It doesn't have to be logical. They can be really silly. They can be beautiful. They can be terrifying. It's entirely up to you. So what I would like to see is I want to see what kind of imaginary friends that you could create if you were just given the challenge to make one up. It could be that you have had one your whole life, or you remember one from your childhood and you want to maybe have a go showing what they're like. You can just make one up. I mean, that's what I did with my book. I think a really good challenge would be to draw a picture of an imaginary creature. One that you could imagine just appearing out of nowhere in a story. Maybe even that could be a really good seed for a story that you write yourself. Now, to give you an idea of the sort of thing I'm thinking of, I've had a go doing some drawings of my own imaginary friends. Are you, Dinah, are you okay if I maybe share them on the screen? Is that okay?
Absolutely. Yeah, please. Yeah,
the first one I came up with, this is, so be kind. This is the best I can do on Microsoft Paint. I did my best. Don't be mean. So I thought first
we won't be mean. We're not mean in Kirklees.
Exactly.
In Yorkshire,
so
we're friendly.
There, just check. Can you see that one, Dinah?
It's coming up now. Yep.
Oh
gosh.
So I thought it would be nice to come up with one that's super cute and silly like that, with lovely big eyes. Now, obviously, if you have a go drawing an imaginary friend, that's brilliant. I think a drawing is a great way to get something from out of your head and into other people's heads. You give them a chance to see what you're thinking about. But as a writer, to be honest, I do that with words. So drawing it is a good start, but I also would like you to push yourselves to label every part of your imaginary friend. And the tricky thing is going to be this. I don't just want you to label eyes, legs, arms. I want you to describe them. And you need to think about the kinds of words that you're going to use. Now, this is a super cute, super silly, dinky little critter. So the words we use are going to have to be cute and silly. I wonder, Dinah, could you pick some good words maybe for this character's eyes? How would you describe them?
I would say googly.
Oh, good, yes.
Googly eyes. Yeah.
Ooh, there, googly eyes. Yeah, that's brilliant. I mean, you could say huge eyes.
Huge,
and you would be right,
googly.
because, I mean, they are huge. But using a word like googly, it sounds silly. You're telling your reader this character is silly. I like that. Oh, actually, Dinah, can I put you on the spot again? Can you give me a good simile for that? Googly eyes like...
Googly eyes like, well, googly boogly, googly eyes like, oh gosh, I need one of the listeners to Google it, to write down in the chat a word for googly eyes like.
Even thinking, so we need something that's big, something that's sort of quite silly, something that sounds quite cute. I mean, I'd be tempted to use some...
We've got some coming in. We've got googly like care headlamps. Car headlamps. Sorry, my mistake. It's a new word. Car headlamps are googly.
Headlamps is good.
Yeah.
Now headlamps,
like
I can totally. Headlamps, I can see that. I can see how that works. The only thing I'm thinking is, I think we need something that's maybe a bit cuter. When I think headlamps, they're big, they're bright, but I don't know if they're cute. So I think we need something like, all right, here's this for a suggestion. Googly eyes.
Wobbly jelly.
Like gumdrops. Wobbly jelly. Yes.
Wobbly jelly.
Googly eyes like wobbly jelly. Now, what I'm going to do, I don't want to lose that headlamp suggestion, because I actually think that's a very good suggestion. Often I think when people come up with a piece of work, they want to like get it perfect first time, and like, you know, they'll rub out their answer that they've changed their minds. I think that's a mistake. I think it's really important to keep stuff that was kind of on the right lines, but maybe not exactly what you wanted. It might be that headlamps idea. You can use that later on. So I'm going to keep that there just for now. Oh, I wonder, let's have one more. I think this kind of, its body, I mean, it looks to me like it's got fur. So it'd be good if we could come up with a good way to describe its fur. I wonder, Dinah, if you could maybe read me out any suggestions or make any suggestions of your own.
Fluffy,
Fluffy is good,
woofy,
yeah. Fluffy.
messy, straggly,
Oh, I like that. Now, messy.
curly whirly.
Oh, curly whirly.
Marshmallows.
Oh, yes, that's it. Curly whirly, like
You've got some great
marshmallows.
suggestions.
Oh, now that's great because marshmallows are kind of soft. They're kind of small, which makes them cute, but they're also like sweets. The second you describe something as being like marshmallows, you're making your reader think of marshmallows. So that's going to work perfectly. Now, obviously, it goes without saying, you might not want to create an imaginary friend who's super cute and lovely. You might be the sort of horrible person who wants to create an imaginary creature that is absolutely disgusting and terrifying. Kind of like this guy who's hopefully popping up on your screen right now.
Oh my goodness me.
It is different. Now,
Yes.
words like googly, words like marshmallow aren't going to work here. We need horrible words. Let's go. All right, I'll start with these eyes. Eyes as red as tomatoes. That's not really going to work. Dinah, are you scared of tomatoes?
No, though I didn't used to like them as a child. I used to not like tomatoes. I couldn't eat chilies.
Agreed.
We've got chilies.
Well, I'm thinking, can you give me some examples of things that we could say? We want to describe these eyes as being red, but we need things that are red but scary.
Fire.
Fiery red eyes. That's good. Any other ones you can think of?
Scary as.
If anybody can send in any suggestions, stuff that's red, stuff that's evil.
Bloodshot eyes.
Oh, yes, blood. That's it. Fiery, bloodshot red eyes. Now, this is good because you're making your reader think about fire and blood. Fire is useful, but it's dangerous. And blood is useful. We need it to live, but people don't like thinking about it. It kind of freaks them out.
No.
So that's a really good way to do it. What about these hands? Maybe go on, I like putting you on the spot. Give me some good ways to describe these hands.
Scissors, knives.
Hands like knives, hands like scissors. You know what? I like both of those. Scissor hands.
Scissor
like
hands.
Knives. That would be amazing. Give me a good adjective, like something knives.
As sharp as knives.
Oh, yeah, I could do that. Get rid of like. Do as sharp as knives. Brilliant, yeah. This is something you should never be afraid to do. If you start writing something and you're like, oh, actually, I need to cross some words out, have another go for it. Now, I think, Danny, you nailed that. That's exactly what I would like people to be doing in their own creations. If you want to do a lovely, cuddly, cute imaginary friend, perfect.
Like the cute raspberry or the fuzzy bear that we had, fuzzy wuzzy bear we had for the other one.
Oh, that's adorable, yeah. But brilliant, you guys are nailing it. We need cute words. If you want to create a scary one, we need scary words. Words that sound horrible. Similes of horrible things. And I look forward to seeing what you come up with.
And Ross, is it true that we can give a prize for this? We can give one of your signed books, is that right? So they could be in chance of getting a signed book.
Yeah. In fact, to be honest, the tricky thing is Midnight Guardians isn't going to be out for a couple of months. No. So as much as I would like to do a signed copy of this, we may not be able to get a hold of one. However, I do have loads of other books that I could do instead. Fantastic. So it might be whoever wins, I think I'll be able to get a copy of one of my other books of your choice. I mean, if you're the sort of person who likes scary stories, I imagine you might like Christmas Dinner with Souls. That is Christmas horror stories. Or it might be you want a story like Perry and Me. This is the story about a girl who discovers an alien on the beach where she lives and raises it in secret as a little brother. And then it grows to the size of Godzilla and takes over the world. whichever one you fancy, I'll be able to sign to you and send.
Wow. Well, what we'll do is we'll put our email address on the bottom. And so we want your pictures with your descriptive words and your scary or your cute, fuzzy, imaginary friends. And if you send them, ask a parent to help you to lal@kirklees.gov.uk. So just ask a grown-up for permission. And if you send them in, you could be in chance of winning one of Ross's signed books. Yay!
Yeah.
Books, we love books. I'm looking. Have we got time, Ross, for just one more reading from your book before we go?
Oh yes, we do. Oh my goodness, I'd love to do that.
Is that okay? Just to leave everybody with a little bit of excitement. Well, a lot of excitement. Before
I know
we
exactly
go.
what I'm going to read.
Oh.
I'm actually going to read a short extract from. To be honest, I think when I wrote this, it was one of the chapters that I was most proud of. You might remember when I was describing this book earlier, I said that they're actually being pursued by an evil character called the Midwinter King, the Lord of all Darkness. As a writer, I'm really proud of this baddie. I like bits in books that are a bit freaky and a bit scary. So writing this evil character was so much fun. If it's okay, I'd like to maybe read a short extract of the bit where we meet the evil character for the first time. Is that okay?
Yes, yes, please. Yes, please.
Oh, fantastic. All right, without any further ado, here is a chapter.
Oops, I will put you.
Oh, there we go.
There we go.
The Burnt Throne. The forest was dead for miles in every direction. The trees were dead. The ground they stood on was dead. Nothing had grown here for as long as anyone can remember. There were some who believed that a terrible crime had been committed here centuries ago and cursed the land. That was the reason, they said, why nothing grew here. Others said it was worse than that. They said that a monster lived in this forest. That was the reason, they said, for the fear you felt in the pit of your stomach when you walked among the dead trees. Others said that was nonsense. They were just stories made to frighten people, and people believed them so much that they felt true. That was the reason, they said, for the sickness you felt in your heart when you even so much as thought of the forest. They were all wrong. If they could somehow look through the forest to the world that lay beneath it, just a hair's breadth away, they would understand. They would watch the trees shift and disappear to be replaced by a black, blasted cliff top rising hundreds of feet above a world of darkness. They would see the throne, vast and desolate, bursting from the stone and spreading into the sky like an abomination. They would see the man sitting inside it. It was wrong to call him a man. There was only where he was and where he was not. The Midwinter King opened his eyes, but they were not really eyes. And that's all you're getting. That is a sneaky peek of the evil baddie, the Midwinter King, from my story. Oh,
wow, thank you so much, Ross. That's keeping us really, really excited for more.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Oh, well, Ross, we're coming to the end of our show, and I've really, really enjoyed it. And I'm sure all our listeners and viewers out there have enjoyed it. We've had lots of viewers, so that's great.
Hey, fantastic. No, I
And
really
can you
hope you
remind us
enjoyed
the
hearing
date
about
when
the
you
story. Oh, sorry,
can you
what was that?
remind us the date when your book comes out again?
It is
Can
The
you remind
Midnight
us the date
Guardian.
when your book comes out again?
Yeah, The
Mm-hmm.
Midnight Guardian is out
Yep.
on November the 5th.
Fantastic. Okay, we look forward to that so much, Ross. And we do have all your books available in our library on our Libby app, Kirklees Overdrive. So all the children and grown-ups out there can get the book. And now we've got them all there for them to borrow. So that's exciting.
Oh, brilliant.
So I'm going to have to say goodbye now. And we will look forward to reading your book and hope to see you soon back in Kirklees.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you so much for having me. And yes, I hope you have a lovely rest of your week.
You're welcome. We've had so much fun and thank you so much for sharing your story. And we look forward to sharing with you all the pictures that the children are going to send in of their imaginary friends. Can we do
Oh, yes,
that?
please. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So it's bye from me. Bye, Ross.
Bye-bye. So long. Lovely to see you.
So thank you. That was great. That was a really enjoyable session. And we can't wait to see Ross's books on our shelves. Remember, everyone, to send in your drawings to the email address at the bottom, which is lal@kirklees.gov.uk. Please ask an adult first and get them to help you if you need to. Next week's Libraries Adventures Live is going to be fun and very active. That's next Tuesday, the 8th September at 11 o'clock. And it's a must watch with Taz, who will be in our studio leading a fun creative workshop. Taz is a talented Yorkshire illustrator, painter, crafter and teacher, and she delivers manga workshops across the country. So you need to have your pens, pencils, crayons at the ready, some paper and card, glue, scissors, coloured pencils, and she will be doing a big craft workshop with you live on Libraries Adventures Live. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Okay, so it's bye from me and bye from Ross in London, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.